Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
So we've had, in this town, we're very aware of big breaches recently. Could you talk a little bit about the malware tactics that have led to some of those breaches, whether they're government or in the corporate side?
Well, like you said, the number of breaches has certainly increased, as has the effectiveness of those breaches. What is often overlooked is, in almost every one of these major breaches, and almost all of the minor breaches, it comes down to an individual. The end users, people like ourselves, are the focal point of the attacks. And the reason why is because technology can do a lot of great things, we can do a lot of improvements, but as long as there's an end user out there, as long as there's a human being at the end point, that's where the target is. They're the ones who are going to be curious, they're the ones who are going to be trying to be collaborative, they're the ones who are going to click on the picture of the pretty kitten and want to find out more about how to buy that, right? So that's the key element here that is often overlooked. How do we protect the end users? And it can't be a regressive strategy of going back to saying end users can't go out and check mail. It can't be about whitelisting. It has to be a more thoughtful, forward-looking strategy of saying we need to empower end users. We need to embrace the fact that they're going to be collaborative. We're going to embrace the fact they're going to have multiple devices. We're going to embrace the fact that they're going to want to be sharing more information. But let's do so in a way that allows them to manage their risk effectively. And that's a big step up. And that's a change in the strategy that we need to implement across the technology, but also the policies that companies implement to be more effective.
Right. So given that, how do you get there? So what are sort of the technologies or the strategies that are going to enable that over the next, say, 5 years, 3 to 5 years?
Well, there's going to be a combination of elements. And security is often bundled into cybersecurity. Well, cybersecurity contains lots of different parts. You have encryption elements, you have advanced threat protection, you have identity and access management, you have firewall network security. So there's not one silver bullet. And I think that's important for everyone to understand is there isn't a silver bullet. It's going to require advances across all these different security elements. It's going to require advances in policy, and it's going to require advances in education. However, we're seeing a lot of really strong advances over the last few years. Investment in endpoint security and end user security has increased significantly. And that's providing new technology that allows companies to embrace a modern workforce, embrace a highly mobile workforce, but do so while managing their risk and controlling access to data, access to networks, and ultimately better protecting their employees.
Right. So in the mobile workforce, as you just talked about, obviously OD is part of that. That they do that and still stay secure. Is that a viable approach?
Both as policy, and it needs to be involving the employees themselves to make sure that they're educated. But a critical element is changing data. For too long, as you think about data on the endpoint, your PCs, your mobile devices, up into public clouds, sort of an afterthought. And if we have been protecting, we've been protecting it using what we call full disk encryption, right? And protecting the device itself. And that's a flawed approach if you consider the fact is that data is going to move around and be very fluid in the new world that we live in. And we need to protect that data without inhibiting users, providing IT and the chief security officer full visibility and control, managing not to inhibit to make their lives difficult.
Right. End users have a lot of issues already, including the fact that, as you noted, on our computers, right? So can you truly be protected from that, or how do you improve that situation of user error?
I mean, the beginning is there's a lot of noise. It's not a lot of acknowledging increasingly difficult to detect, but we shouldn't give up on stopping it at the endpoint. We shouldn't give up on that first line of defense. First is there needs education, right? Employees, individuals need to feel that they own responsibility for helping to protect the enterprise. It can't just be about the technology. You need to be trained. You need to understand what you should and should not click on. But that's not enough. The technology also needs to evolve, and the technology is evolving. For many years, we depended on traditional signature-based anti-malware. I'm sure we're all using it on our PCs. I'm sure we all would acknowledge it's not effective, right? Signature anti-malware depends upon being able to identify a set of signatures and then saying, okay, is that a good or bad executable? Clearly, with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of new malware variants every day, that approach is no longer working. However, the good news is there's a lot of new companies with new technology out there that are building solutions that do not inhibit end users, but do a much better job of detecting and preventing these new advanced threat protections. Dell partners with a company called Invincia. They're just down the street in Northern Virginia. They came out of DARPA. Their approach is a containerized solution. So they're going to keep all your untrusted data, your browser and your email attachments in a sandboxed arena that separates it from your workflow, thus doing so preventing those attacks from actually getting to your PCs. So yes, the challenge is significant. Yes, we are challenged right now and we're behind, but there's a lot of great new technology coming on board, like Invincia, that companies can utilize. And then it's also tying that to education and policy programs that make employees more aware and more accountable what they're doing.
Got it.
So it's not hopeless at all. We just need to keep working forward towards it.
Great. Let's just pause there. Are there any questions from the audience? Anyone like to jump in here? No? Okay. We'll go to one last one, at least. If you had a greater level of data visibility and you could help detect these data breaches, or you were able to detect some of the data breaches we talked about at the outset a bit earlier, what would that change? And is there that opportunity on the horizon? Is there that opportunity for better data visibility around your data forthcoming?
So the answer to the first part of the question is, if you had better visibility of your data, would it help us with these attacks? The answer is absolutely. I think, as many of you know, once the breach occurred, you see months, even years go by before a recognition by the organization that they have been breached. So having better visibility on data is an absolute imperative. And if you take and transfer that to the physical world, companies know where their physical assets are. If you're in construction, you know where your cranes and your bulldozers are. Data is cornerstone of your assets. You need to make sure that you have visibility on where it's going to go. Second part of the question, are we getting to the point of having visibility with data? The answer is also yes. We have undertaken our own projects where we're working on being able to ensure visibility of who's accessing the data, where they're accessing it from, and how they're accessing it. And being able to provide that information back to your CIO or your CSO, and then be able to mine that information to look for anomalies. So if you're able to understand where's my data going, who's opening it, and where they're opening it, you should be able to detect much earlier if you're having some sort of breach or a breach has occurred. And that's going to help transform the game. But this all comes back to, first and foremost, companies have to be thinking about their data as an asset and protecting it as such. Encrypting it, providing additional visibility around where it is at, ensuring that there's true access control no matter where it is. And these things are going to help allow us to do a much better job of enforcing protection and mitigating risk going forward.
Got it. Got it. Questions? All right, one last one. Millennials in the workplace. We talked a little bit about this. We were at an event last week in Boston where a gentleman, Chris Rulin from Bastille, said millennials are an insider threat. Basically, that our insistence on bringing, I'm on Team Millennial, insistence on bringing devices, on accessing outside services, et cetera, is a very unique issue for companies as they go forward. How do you think about that, or how do you sort of come at that issue of, as those of us in that cohort continue to grow in the workforce? How do you guys come at that problem, or how do you think about that?
Well, I appreciate you taking the heat for the millennials, but it's not just millennials, right? I have 3 different devices I use to access company assets. I think most of us have now accepted the fact that we're going to have a cell phone, a personal tablet, you're going to have your work PC. Most of us use a Dropbox or a Box or a G Drive or OneDrive. So millennials are certainly the most aggressive in that, but it's everyone. So I don't think you can just say, okay, we need to treat millennials as a problem. What we need to do is acknowledge that the workforce has changed, and how people access data, how people access their applications has evolved tremendously over the last 10 years. And we need technology and policies that embrace that change. Trying to be regressive and saying, I'm going to lock you down. You're not going to be able to access data except in a company PC, in a company environment. Certainly will work for a select number of organizations, but if you want to recruit the best and brightest and you want to embrace a workforce that is mobile and collaborative, you can't go down that direction. So we need to be thinking about, again, how do I protect the assets, the data itself, no matter where it moves? And how do I ensure that I have visibility and control as it moves around? And that's a big step forward for us. It's a big change in sort of the IT history, but that's where we need to go because that's where the people are going and that's how the workforce is going. I think there's a question.
Awesome. Yeah. Yes. Hi, just hold on one second. We'll get you a mic here.
It's on its way.
We want everyone on C-SPAN to hear your question too.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sharon Bovat, voice of a moderate. I'll put my coffee down. I have a question. I took my child on a Disney Baltic cruise, and I actually had to get, because Leningrad or St. Petersburg was a stop, a DoD-compliant wipe on my computer. And I'd been hacked 3 or 4 times, and I had to get the data back. And then now I don't want to restore my computer, and I've decided that a lot of that data I don't need. A lot of the data came from, like, torture, just information that we don't want out, but they just didn't want it to get on a network. And I think that there needs to be a standard policy because there are people carrying around stuff on their laptops, and I carry 2 laptops. But when I got that DoD wipe, I felt so refreshed. I felt like, wow, I've got this clean slate. And I think everybody should be doing something. Is there a protocol with these companies, with people transferring their documents when they go out of the country? Because the State Department gave me different advice than the DoD. So I would really like one formula for when you travel and you have data, one formula to follow, because I found it very confusing, so I just did the strictest one. Thank you.
I will agree completely that it's a challenging space right there, and there is no absolute. So I would also say that while one formula will be ideal, it might need different needs for different types of people, right? It's depending on how much security you require, how much the asset's going to be attacked, it's going to require different types of formulas. However, I will also say that there is an opportunity around data to be thoughtful both in terms of what you're creating and what you're actually putting into the marketplace. The whole concept of creating data that then is launched into cyberspace and then can be used against you is something we should also be aware of. It is a growing need to be thoughtful of what am I putting out there and how could that be used against you.
Any other questions? Sure, one right here.
Yes, sir.
Julie? Julie? Oh, man. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Josh Stiefel. I'm part of the Millennial cohort.
Team.
wanting to invest in those technologies and then becoming so reliant that they don't continue to invest in new ones. How do you break that? Because it seems to be sort of a common trap for every private enterprise and the government for that matter. So what can you do to break that psychology?
Well, as a provider of technology, I'm thrilled that we want to break that psychology and continue to invest in new technology. That's good news for me. I think education is absolutely foremost. There is, at this stage, a lot of excitement in the marketplace around cybersecurity. And I talk to customers, companies of large and small every day about how to improve their cybersecurity. What I stress to them is this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. This is going to take time. And that to be really effective with cybersecurity, you need to stop thinking it as an end goal of its own and start to bring it as part of your business goals and your business objectives. So as you're considering where your business is going, you need to be thinking about cybersecurity. As an example, I was talking to a company that is increasingly outsourcing more of their production. That is creating opportunities to be more efficient. It's expediting their completion of new projects. However, it's also creating new risk as they're having to put more of their IP into the hands of their partners. There needs to be a cybersecurity strategy about how do you do a better job of protecting that IP. And so I think that's the change that we need to help drive into the industry is rather than getting caught up in the latest technology and just embracing it and being done, it's how does the technology enable your business strategy to be executed? And as your business strategy continues to evolve, so much your cybersecurity strategy as well. And that's a change in the mindset, but it's absolutely critical if we're going to get in front of the challenges that we have today.
Awesome. One last question right there.
You got a mic on your way.
It's coming to you. It's coming to you.
Russell Shell, I'm also part of the Millennial cohort here. So my question is that the solutions that you've focused on, recommendations have been focusing on the end users, the devices, and how do we sort of secure those items. My question is, what are your views about cybersecurity from the network management level, at the communications network level, and how can that sort of what are your views in terms of what can be done there on that front to ensure cybersecurity?
So maybe we'll just take the last question back there, and you can answer them both, because we're short on time. We'll go right there. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Andy Hayter. I'm from G-Data Software. And you mentioned education and accountability from the end user's perspective. Other than a slap on the wrist or you're fired, how do you manage accountability? What is your idea for accountability?
Okay.
Network management, accountability.
Got it. Network management. So I obviously work for Dell, and Dell has a few PCs that we sell every year, and we're very proud of that. So we do have a big focus around the endpoint and the end user security. I also think that's been a neglected part of the security environment. But security is, as I mentioned earlier, all about depth. There's no one solution. It's all about multiple different solutions. And increasingly, what will make these solutions more effective is the ability of the different pieces to talk to each other. So as I'm collecting information around the attacks and the threat surface at the endpoint, my ability to pass that to a network-based security is going to enhance its security and vice versa. And so increasingly what you're going to see is the concept of connected security, where these different assets start to communicate with one another, and through that communication be more effective in terms of both addressing threats as well as being proactive in preventing them in the first place. That's a journey we're working on. Dell has a great asset called Sonic Wall, which we work very closely with. It's a firewall and a network-based security solution. And so we're going to be taking those steps ourselves to really further integrate the two offerings, to share information in real time to make them much more effective as a team. Both great offerings independently, but better as a team together. Second question, accountability. And as that's a tough question to answer. There's a lot of different discussions about how to encourage workforce. A lot of what I've seen is successful is the carrot approach versus the stick. So, encouraging workers to be thinking about how they can be more safe. Those who go a certain amount of time without some sort of breach or violation receive either an award or recognition. There's also those companies who are focusing on the shaming approach. Using a little bit of, okay, John's been breached 5 times in the last month. John, you're a bad guy, and letting everyone know about that. And that's obviously a little more draconian, but it's probably some sort in the middle where you're using both a carrot and stick approach. But certainly at this stage, given the fact there is such a low level of appreciation for workforce and employee accountability, I think the carrot is a great way to go. Notify workers who's doing well, give kudos, acknowledge the fact that people are doing the right thing, and that can help drive the right type of behavior. It's not going to happen overnight. Like everything with security, this is a marathon. This is going to take time in terms of changing workforce behavior, embracing new technology. But if we focus on sort of the key needs of empowering employees, protecting data, and addressing these advanced advanced persistent threats, we're going to be much more effective in the long haul.
Beautiful. Brett Hansen, Executive Director, Dell Data Security. Thanks for coming.